Rubio, Director of Marketing here at T1V. I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves and just say a few words about your role and what you do with your respective company. And then I'll just start kind of our two lines of questioning. So the first line of questioning is going to be kind of focused a bit more on the active learning side. So Brent is going to kind of lead a lot of those questions, and then Jim and Frank are going to weigh in with their opinions as well. And then we'll kind of switch focuses over to the collaboration side. So with that, I'll let Frank, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Frank Molesky. I run the Charlotte office for Cenero. We are a top 20 audiovisual design integration unified communications firm in Charlotte. So we service the private higher education market, corporate environment, everything from interactive spaces to video walls and unified communications.
Hello, my name is Brent Babb. I work for Wake Forest University. I'm the Assistant Director of IT Infrastructure with an emphasis on multimedia. We support a little over 450 spaces on campus, from classrooms to event spaces and anything that incorporates that kind of multimedia technology.
And hello, I'm Jim Morris. I'm the CTO here at T1V. And in my role, I focus on kind of new technologies, new products that we're going to bring to the market. You know, I get involved with our kind of key customers and understand their use cases and make sure that we're designing the right products to fit their needs.
Great. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate having you. Yeah. So the first question I'm going to throw out is, can you provide an overview of trends you're seeing in the classroom and discuss your experience to date with active learning spaces and flipped learning?
Sure. So the trends in higher ed, I've been in higher ed for just over 20 years. And so what we're seeing in higher ed is a transition from digital and flipped and active learning classrooms as opposed to lecture-based classrooms. But what the challenging factor is you have faculty members who are more fluid than in a K through 12 environment. And so in that transition, when you have an active learning classroom or a flipped classroom or those types of spaces, you have to make sure you train the professors on how to use those. So we're being really strategic on where we place those in the college environment and making sure that we are utilizing them correctly, because it's a lot of expense for technology.
Yeah, and some of the things that we see, interacting with, with these universities, and the trends that we see, probably there's two main trends. One is the active learning type environments that are coming on, and these have been around for a while. I think what we're seeing now is creating them with the right use cases to make them easy to use, and so that professors can walk right in and understand how to use it, and they don't have to get so much training on on lots of switching equipment that they figure out how to use it, because if it's too hard, they just really won't use it. It needs to be simple and easy to use, something they can learn in just a few minutes. So we're definitely seeing that. I think also we're seeing a push toward supporting BYOD from all the students in small huddle space kind of environments. So we see kind of both of those two things happening in the university areas.
Great. What have been some of the biggest challenges you've come up against in the past when trying to upgrade existing classrooms?
Great question. Ease of use. You hit the nail on the head. Ease of use is the number one goal. If a faculty member, professor, or an event person coming in, or a guest member, if they can come in and connect to the system and use it, we've all succeeded in our jobs. So ease of use is one of those. And what was the other part of the question?
When you're trying to upgrade classroom technology, what are the hurdles there?
So upgrading technology, it's important to know that it's not a one-size-fits-all. It is really a needs-based design space. So what I mean by that is, instead of going in and just upgrading technology for what was there and replicating the same things that you had in the classroom prior, go in and speak to the faculty and the chairs of the departments and the people that are using the spaces in the administration or whoever it is, and ask them how they're using the space. Ask the right questions and design that space around how they're using it. Don't just mirror it and put it in there and walk away. So that's the biggest thing that we're seeing. We're not, I call it database classroom design or database AV design. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, we do. I think that was key there, being flexible. I mean, we see a lot. Even though we've come up with some designs that we worked with, for example, as we've shown before at Texas A&M, for some kind of optimum designs for these active learning classrooms. But when we take them to other universities, they all have a slight twist on how they want to use it, maybe a little differently. And so, having the capability to be flexible, to put different types of use cases and have them fit well by making some changes in the technology is important.
For us, it's adoption, making sure you have a training and migration path for that new technology. As you have a baseline standard, when you do these technology upgrades and invest in something new to solve a business or educational application, it's having a champion that helps roll it out, support it, and teach in the technology that the instructors want, not just what maybe the software or the technology provides.
Great. John touched on BYOD in his presentation. How do you guys see BYOD changing the way teachers and students are interacting in the classroom?
So we at Wake Forest are BYOD space. So we've had some challenges, all good challenges, and it's really just a matter of how to make the equipment function easy for the user base. When we start thinking about interactive classrooms and spaces, what we're finding is really they just want to mirror their image. So if a student wants to share what they're doing on a worksheet or whatever, they want to just mirror that. They don't want to interact and raise their hand and do all those types of things. So we're now starting to cross that barrier of they expect it to mirror in the classroom. They expect to be able to share their presentation. They expect to be able to do all these things. The next step, I think, is going to be the collaborative piece to that. And at Wake Forest, we're there, but it's real specific. It's a specific need and a specific class and a specific discipline that needs that collaborative piece.
So for us, one of the things we notice with BYOD Challenge is it's a third-party application or a third-party source provider. It's important with a company such as T1V or others that may exist that are dedicated to this space is that, I know some of the folks in the room can attest to using iPads, for example, is that we can have everything working, and if a student or a faculty member updates software overnight, and there's not a good software application team behind the scenes dedicated to that environment, the end result is we're left holding the bag. I don't think anyone calls Bellevue or in Northern California gets support for those kind of things. So that's a big challenge for us and many of our ed clients.
Yeah, and I would echo on that and say that once it breaks that first time, they've lost the confidence in using the tech. So confidence is another big key in the education space.
Yeah, I was going to comment about, we've seen in rollouts that we've done in universities that it's pretty impressive. I mean, the students completely embrace it and pick it up very quickly. They don't even need any training on anything. They just walk in the room. Maybe you haven't even told them they should use it yet. They're already logged in, doing it, sharing their screens and all this stuff. The trick then is really, do you get the professors to be able to use the same kind of technology? And so, having technology that lets people bring any device that they have, Android, iPhone, Windows, Mac, whatever, and being able to share that is real important. It also needs to be really, it also needs to be easy enough that you can get the professors to kind of embrace that and start using it also. And, I think a lot of that is really key around the software that you're using and how, and how it's designed. So we spend a lot of time, trying to focus on that as an organization.
Are you utilizing interactive touchscreens and displays in the classroom? And if not, why not? And do you have any plans to do so in the future?
Yes, we are, but it's very specific. It's a targeted audience. What we're finding again is one of those spaces where if we deploy a lot of this technology that they're just not using it quite yet. And so the cost of a display versus a cost of a touch display and how they're going to use it is just, we have to weigh those factors. And so in higher ed and education in general, budget is a big concern, and you only get so many chances to do this, you know, where corporate world might be a little bit different. So we have to be real focused on where we put pieces of technology and make sure the adoption is well received before deploying in many places. So we're getting there. It's coming faster than probably our budget can keep up with, maybe, or any higher ed, or for that matter, but it's happening because it's on their device at home every day.
Right.
Yeah, and I think in our active learning experience classrooms that we've done, you know, almost all of those designs, they have a touch screen for the professor to use, and it's really his way to control everything in the room. So we definitely see that. You know, and as a technology company, we try to develop, you know, all kind of elaborate solutions for all kinds of use cases. But we've seen kind of in those active learning spaces that where the students are located, you know, it's not really as important to have a touchscreen. They're really kind of sitting in a small group. They want to show content to each other, kind of talk about it face to face. They don't necessarily need to have touchscreens in those areas, even though we do get in a lot of discussions with universities where their first impact is, hey, I need a touchscreen everywhere. You know, all the students need touchscreens, the professors need touchscreens, and then, you know, a lot of times when we go through the real use case and what they're going to use, you find out it doesn't really buy you much, except you know, it's just cool, you know, and it's not really going to get used as much as they might think. So I think it is important to think about the use cases as you talked about, where it's real, you know, where is it important really to have touch screens located, and you know. Sometimes it's just a habit to, you know, to make the whole, you know, to make all the features that you want to do in the room easy to do. You know, so that's a big reason also. Yeah.
Great. Where do you see technology in the classroom 5-10 years from now?
Technology in the classroom is definitely growing, but it's growing in a simplistic way. And what I mean by that is everybody's going to want it wireless, and they're going to want to be able to take their BYOD device and display content up there and control everything they want from that piece. We're seeing a big shift in wireless first, and actually we're kind of leading that charge at the university. We've deployed a lot of wireless systems across the campus, and different manufacturers, to be honest, because again, needs-based and that type of stuff. But most people don't want to connect to a wire, and if you think about the connections of USB, USB-C, mini display adapter, all those things, and if you align that with education and how many classrooms we support, and we have to put those in every single classroom, you're talking a major budget hit every year, and the durability that those things have to withstand from the faculty and the students, and getting stolen and all that kind of stuff. It all has to be factored in. So I think technology really in the classroom is going wireless. That would be my prediction.
Yeah, so what we see from an integration perspective, probably the following three things. AV over IP is taking over, and it will take over. And in something like Wake Forest, they're an older building that's 100 years old. How do you utilize the same thing? Why is your audiovisual integrator pulling the same cables? The other is software-based conferencing, software-based audiovisual, and now the transition to AV as a service. You have phone systems as a service, you have software as a service. We're starting to see that as well. Different budgets, different migrations of that, but is our most popular conversation at the moment. And as you look at a larger initiative, multi-floor, multi-classroom, multi-site, it is definitely the most prevalent thing in the industry currently.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, this push toward using more software-based solutions in replace of hardware-centric, you know, hardware single-use kind of situation, you know, single-use solutions, you know, and replacing those with more generic solution that you can just upgrade the software and get new features and different capabilities over time. That's definitely, I kind of think that's how the whole industry is moving, really, and is definitely, you know, definitely showing up in higher education.
I would say we're definitely cloud first. Cloud first is our approach. Anything that we look at, we're cloud first. So we've actually migrated our AV monitoring system to cloud first, and now I get weekly reports on a Monday morning that our tech team can go out and respond to tickets or problems in a classroom before a faculty member can even go into the space and have a problem. So we're looking at cloud first too.
Great. I'm going to transition now over into kind of the collaboration side of our questioning. But you mentioned analytics and data previously, so I think that's a good way to parlay into, are you using data-based or analytics-based design in any of your projects? And can you elaborate on maybe how this has impacted the way that you're planning for future deployments?
Frank?
Yeah, so Cenero started the analytics of audiovisual years ago, right? And that's been our claim to fame, and others just caught up to that, from end users to also some others in the marketplace. But it's using data to make the decisions for audiovisual. Brent's campus is a perfect example of, or as Jim said, I need a whiteboard everywhere. Well, what are you going to use it for? Or I need an interactive board everywhere. So being able to take that to the next budget cycle and say we deployed X. Now, what was the success or the success criteria? What was the adoption? And either the technology wasn't good, the application wasn't good, or we didn't do a good job training our staff. Take that, to a CFO for a next level of funding, and you have a whole different conversation around organizational budgets and things like that, funding. And then as far as monitoring and metrics, you've been able to manage your switches, your codecs, your phones for all these years. Why not the software and the audiovisual systems? So it is the industry now.
Yeah, I mean, we see that in almost every kind of project that we do. And I think there's two big places. Being able to report all of this data, how things are being used, status of devices, first lead into having very fast response on the support side. But then taking that same data and using that to build up, hey, these are the features people are really using. I mean, we use it ourselves to decide what are the most important features, what are the pain points that we see customers using, and then our customers use it to help decide what technology they really want to implement and whether they got their ROI on it or not. So it's definitely huge in the space now.
Yeah, for Wake Forest, I have this little presentation that I take to administration and others and share it, and it's called Database Classroom Design. And so when I first got to Wake Forest, I deployed a system through AMX. It's an AMX remote monitoring system. But anyway, I moved it to the cloud, and then I started collecting information off classrooms, because what we were finding is professors wanted to just have what they had before. And who are we being IS or anybody else, to tell them that they can't have it? So we would deploy it, we would manage it, we would supervise it, and train and all that stuff. In the end, it turned out, by collecting that data, and we did it over a couple semesters, because you can't do it off one semester, we found out that they are actually using it a certain way. And then we took that model and we developed a classroom standard of that system. And so now we have 3 systems that captures our 80% that fit that model, so to speak. And then we have that 20% for the interactive, the flipped classrooms and those spaces. And I think we'll eventually see the shift if we continue to go online learning for flipped and interactive, and we'll just continue rotating that. So what it's actually done is it's made our return on investment huge, because if I don't have to train, or we don't have to train anybody, then we succeeded. And that's what we're seeing in our very simple classrooms, that somebody just wants to come in, present their stuff, and walk out the door. So no training means success for us.
Yeah, I was going to additional comment. I mean, you'd seen our thing about Texas A&M installation that we did. I think a big worry that the Texas A&M University had about those rooms were the professors really going to take hold to the technology and use it? And they had this interactive whiteboard that the professors were going to ideally write all their notes on. They still had the other whiteboards on the side just in case, but the metrics that they got out of the first week, they were just so happy when they saw the data, that there was like miles and miles of annotations done just by professors in the first week. And without that data, it's really, it was really a lot more subjective. But once they start getting the raw data, they're able to make decisions, and they're like, oh wow, this is definitely way more than a success than we thought it was going to be in the first week. So it's key. Yeah.
And I actually want to say that showing the customer or your professor, whoever, the data, so it's in front of them, so they don't just hear what you're saying, they see what you're saying, is a big factor in making the decision. So if you lay out this data, for example, in a pie graph form, and you have your input usage and how they use the system for the last 24 months, they see it and they understand, and they're right on your side, and you move on about it and install the right software or the right system.
Great, thank you. How is video collaboration changing the way people are interacting and communicating with one another?
So for us, yeah, you could jump in as well, but for us, the home drives the education and then drives corporate as the transition through the ages occurs. And I know John commented on Mike's vision coming from the iPhone all those years ago, but why was it so hard to make a video call, when you could call your grandmother on FaceTime, and that was able to work, and you were able to quickly open a document, pinch and zoom. So as that has gotten cheaper and easier and more accepted, we've seen the deployment go up. I was talking to Chris here earlier about that and said our cost per room goes down, but our number of rooms and our average sale goes up because so many more people want it. It's not just for boardrooms anymore. That's at least how we're seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think video conferencing has been around for a long time, but it's been primarily kind of high-end systems that connects special groups of people together. My own vision. I mean, I think what's really driven the adoption of it is just the ease of use, and you can tell that ease of use is driven right down to the consumer in things like FaceTime, where they just hit a button and it starts. And that's really driven back to the enterprise that, hey, we need to make our solutions at least as easy as that. This is what they're doing it at home. How come I can't do it in the office? And most manufacturers now have started embracing this kind of one click to start concept for video conferencing. And as you see that roll out, it is taking off a lot.
I think we'll see, if you think about, at least in higher ed, K through 12 and higher ed coming through that age group is, I have kids and they don't know what not having a video is when they're talking to someone. So if we think about the migration of where this is headed, let's look at our own families and look at how they're growing through the world, and video is going to be the number one thing that they're going to expect. And then if you think about it even further, voice control. So how does all that start playing into your move? And higher education and K through 12, it's going to hit us first, because that's the migration path of the kids.
Yeah. Everything I do as a parent is challenged by Alexa. So
Exactly.
my 4-year-old knows now to ask for validation from the kitchen counter. So it's
Move
pretty
that to the corporation and we're good.
Exactly.
Speaking of the future and the technology that kind of the youth is going to be brought up with, virtual reality. So do we think this is going to become part of the classroom or the meeting space? When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen?
Well, I'll start on this one. I think virtuality has some really cool use cases, and I'm not one of the big ones saying that I think it's going to really invade the meeting space. But it may. I could be wrong on that one, but it's really good when someone wants to visualize some kind of virtual space, or something, or a model in a computer, things like that. When you have multiple people in a room, my own thought is, it kind of maybe gets in the way of those people in the room communicating and collaborating with each other. But I do think it could help people that are remote to be able to collaborate with the people in the room better. So it may come in that kind of phase first, is kind of what I would see. For example, when we have these big virtual canvases, people in the room, they're looking at the screen, moving things around. Maybe somebody remote could have his goggles on and be looking all over the canvas. That's kind of a cool use case for that. That's kind of my own thoughts on that, but we'll see where it goes, I guess.
We haven't.
Go ahead.
We haven't seen it in the meeting space as much as the enterprise experience centers, consumer brands. Even if you get landscaping work done at your house now, you can envision it. So they say most people are visual learners. I think when it's otherwise capital intensive to have that, where you can benefit from a rendering or virtual reality, we're seeing it. We're seeing the use of things like the planar walls in association with goggles and things like that, where otherwise replicating it would be too burdensome financially. But we're not seeing it yet in meeting rooms, at least not here.
The only thing I would say to that is ADA compliancy and inclusion. So when you think about having a meeting where someone can't get to a space because of whatever it is, that goggle then creates that inclusion that they are there in the space. So I think that could be the next transition for that in the higher ed space.
Right. What are some things to consider when trying to support global organizations with multiple offices or organizations with a remote workforce?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we see, we have a lot of clients that are global, large enterprises. One of them is being able to provide support, for all of their devices globally. So that's definitely a challenge. I think we've come up with a pretty good system for that. But the other is these different organizations, they really need ways to collaborate, between their sites. And I think the collaboration products, like one of the ones that we developed and others that are on the market, really lend toward that. Along with video conferencing and having canvases that they can all share and see exact same content at different locations. I think that is definitely a big factor in driving efficiencies in these big organizations.
Yeah, for us it's support as well, but support is a very loose term. So it's also supporting the supporter. So that's for us. That's aggregating all of the suppliers, right? There's a software here. There's a board, a camera. There's a number of different touch points, and that is being simplified as an industry, but a lot of these global organizations have tier 1 support, and it's how do we back them up and give them the tools they need to react quickly to their bosses or their users, and being able to aggregate all that data into one place and into one portal or one easy to use metric that they can access readily.
What tips can you provide when it comes to future-proofing your collaborative spaces? How do you plan to extend the lifetime of solutions?
Well, I think the one that comes to my mind really is, getting solutions that are more software-based, and so that they kind of grow, with your organization, and as new capabilities come out in the future, they can kind of just be upgraded into those. It doesn't really help with physical displays. I mean, eventually you have to replace those over time, but definitely the infrastructure behind it, if it's more software based, then that just kind of continues to grow along, over time. So,
I would say for higher ed, future-proofing means just getting your budget to align and keep up with technology. Because a lot of times funding gets in the way of technology improvements. And so if you can try and baby step that in slowly and have a migration path and a pattern to keep up with technology, I would call that future-proofing for lack of better words.
How has the move towards smaller huddle spaces changed the types of meetings and technology that you're seeing being used in those spaces?
So for us, it's been the adoption of unified communication. The number of physical huddle rooms, the cost per square foot to deploy them, that all goes back to the data-driven analytics of, getting away from the 12 and 15 person boardrooms more frequently because the metrics say otherwise. They say the average meeting has 4 to 5 people from a team. So now that all those teams are enabled with the technology to do their job, and we're seeing that with retrofits and upfits and new designs. It also lowers the cost per square foot, which is usually one of the highest capital items for a company. So more technology, easier to use, or more rooms with collaborative technology. They're easier to use.
Yeah, I mean, and we definitely see a huge rise in, adoption of Huddle Spaces and putting some technology in there. Kind of the main difference that we see is, in the Huddle Spaces, it's really a more simplistic technology solution, kind of like what you were talking about. Maybe just something as simple as wireless screen sharing, and that's it. And then as you move up the chain into the bigger spaces, the level of collaboration typically needs to be higher with more features and capabilities. Maybe connecting to remote locations and things like that.
The only thing I would say for higher ed and these small huddle spaces is if you take a huddle space in higher ed and put it in a corner where it's not visible and it's not public facing, the students don't seem to gravitate there. They like being in the mix of everybody. So being strategic of where you put huddle spaces in higher ed specifically is important for them to get used.
I made it a point to hide in the back of the library through college. I remember.
What are your most common challenges when dealing with collaboration technology?
Ease of use. That's it. If it's not easy, that's our biggest challenge.
Yep. Ours is adoption based on application. Someone saw something at a conference, wanted it, but didn't understand how to use that tool to solve their business need. So just making sure that it's the right tool that's solving the business need.
Yeah, I think that's a key one. That you're talking about, making sure they really are, that they plan to use it to solve a real need. It's not just they get it because it's cool. You install things, put some new technology in because it's really cool. It gets used for a month or something, and then people aren't really using it, effectively, and they're not seeing the value in it. So they really have to have a need that they're trying to solve. And I think there's lots of those, but people just need to have a clear vision of that. So I think it's one of the key things I think that we try to do, and I think everybody should do that, is really understand your customer, what they're really trying to solve, and make sure that you're putting things in place to do that.
Great. Well, those are the end of my questions. So now I want to open it up to the audience. Do y'all have any questions that you would want to ask our panelists?
Don't be afraid of the cameras.
I'll try to ask a question.
We had to do it. You can too.
What we run into more in the corporate world is the huddle space. But I was talking to a guy at Duke recently, and he said the majority of their classes are getting smaller and smaller. Are you experiencing the same thing?
No, our classes are getting a little bit larger, but you got to keep in mind that we are a private organization that prides ourselves in teacher to student ratios and small spaces, but we're going from, we don't have 300 and 400 size classrooms. Our classrooms are 15, 18 to 70, or 100. And so when you start, I think that's why we're not seeing that shift.
Because you're already there.
Essentially we're already there. We're already working closely with our students in a small environment and not in a really large space.
Yeah, I do see with the education clients that we deal with a push toward smaller classroom sizes. For example, the Texas A&M, the new building they put in, they had a mandate from their engineering, the dean of engineering, that said we don't want any class sizes above 100 students. And before that, like in some other buildings, they have them that are 500 students or something, really high numbers. And of course, that changes a lot of dynamics, because now it's like, well, we have to have more classes to handle the amount of students we have. We have to have more professors. But the goal there was just to increase, retention rates of students. How much they learn and graduation rates and all these things. And that was their vision. That one key metric they wanted to shoot to was not to have any class sizes bigger than 100. And they have quite a few actually lower than that too. But
I do have a quick question. A lot of the conversation is around the higher ed platform. Generally, they mention the corporate platform. So taking the benefits that you've openly spoken about today for higher ed in more of a corporate setting, what do you advise for corporate environments that may not have that tier 1 support, but also stay aligned with the ever-changing needs in the corporate arena? What advice do you have for that?
So from our perspective, touching all endpoints is vendor selection and reviewing the application and the roadmap. So understanding where you are today, what your initiatives are, and things that are coming down the pike. So that's the planning side of it. And then on the back end is, picking the right supplier that matches your level of enterprise, right? Is that 24/7? Is it global? Is it regional? Is it national? And making sure they have the correct software and processes in place to do that, to act as your tier 1 support. And we can give you a bunch of information on that offline. And I know Chris here is familiar with that as well.
Yeah, and I didn't mean for us to be solely talking about education. Actually, corporate space is actually a bigger portion of our business than the education market, even though they're both pretty big. But and we, I think in the education side, we probably do see a lot of people having their own support staff that they want to go to first before they come to kind of our support staff. But in the enterprise, it's most of the time it's kind of the opposite. The enterprise tends to rely on our support team to handle issues in their rooms remotely. A lot of times, and that's the key thing about having monitoring systems and data, because we actually know about problems that happen before people walk in the room in the morning. And so we try to take care of those kind of problems. So I would recommend that you try to partner with companies that have those kind of solutions available. The enterprise also sees it a lot of times as, hey, we're going to add these new, all this new technology in. That means I got a lot more work to do. So they like, some of them really like the idea of, this group is going to handle the support for that for me, and I can just kind of call them when there's an issue. So both of those, we see that happen a lot, actually. So.
And even with things such as collaborative, most enterprise integration partners now are under both immediate SLA and on-site SLAs, but it's the ability to be proactive and be ahead of it that is the most beneficial, we find, at this point. Just like if your phones or your switch, your routers go down.
So you talked about 2 challenges, ease of use and then adoption. If it is easy to use, what are you doing at Wake Forest for adoption? Get people that have been doing the same thing for years and years and years and years to switch over to something different?
It's a great question. So 2 years ago was the time that I actually had enough data to talk about and to take it forward to the faculty and say, hey, here's how we're using these spaces. And so the first couple were really challenging. They didn't really believe you. They didn't understand. They just wanted what they wanted and had what they wanted to replace what they had. Now what we're seeing is, hey, I've heard from Joe or Dr. Smith that this room is always up and always running and it's so easy and all I do is go in and I click here and I'm going. How can we get that? How can we get that? So that's one way. The other way we're doing it is we have a space called, or a committee called the Learning Spaces Committee. That Learning Spaces Committee I'm the chair of, and what we do is outreach, 100% outreach. We go out and reach out to these folks. We join their departmental meetings and we show them that simplicity also equals reliability. And you put those 2 words together and the faculty members are on it and they just go with it because then it doesn't interrupt their class. Well, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you could teach class without tech. You can't teach class today without technology. Every single class pretty much has some type of technology. Our next challenge is digital media. That's the next thing to tackle. That answer your question?
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Great. If we don't have any other questions, thank you again, panelists, for joining me up here, and thank you all for being here.